So somewhere around 2 years in the military, I hadn't experienced parachuting. And I got in my head, Mark, that my parachute's not going to open. My parachute's not going to open. And it opened, but it was in my head that it wasn't. And you can't like, hey, Sergeant, I know I'd like to just kind of sit this one. But then I thought, well, then it kind of came to, and this is, so this will tell your listeners that this guy's not really bright, but this is how my brain works. So then I thought, what do I really believe is going to happen? Now I had my faith tradition, and I certainly had some Baptist in the unit, and there were some Methodists, and there was all the flavors of all the different denominations of people, and they all had their own theology and their own about what happens in the next life. It's a judgment box, whatever it is. And I had my own that I was taught, but I thought, what do I really believe is going to happen? Is St. Peter at the gate?
Welcome to Double Helix, where everything is connected. Hey there, awesome viewers and listeners. I'm your host, Mark Merritt, and on this show, we're going to dive into the fascinating web of connections that shape our health and our lives, from our physical and psychological well-being to our emotional and spiritual growth. We'll explore how these connections, whether they're with the people around us or in intricate networks within ourselves, all the way down to our DNA, and how that can transform our lives for the better. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up for episodes that resonate with you. Let's get connected. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Double Helix, where everything's connected. Today, I'm excited and thrilled to introduce our guest, Kirk Weisler. He's an internationally renowned speaker, and I found all kinds of fun things out to him recently. Kirk and I met, maybe 20 years ago. I think was the first time that we met, and we spoke a lot more. It's when you lived in Atlanta. You were in Georgia for a while.
Yeah.
I remember us being on the phone then, and I got a story to share. Your daughter's older now, but I just remember you talking about people sitting on their phones on a wall, talking to each other, texting.
Right.
And we still do that. We still do those things. If anything, we're worse now than we were back then.
I think you're right, Mark.
But we're super excited to have you. Kirk is actually he's done national speaking and training. One of my favorite titles that he has is Chief Culture Officer. Did I remember that correctly?
Chief Morale.
Morale. Well, it ties into culture, but morale. Yeah,
it sure does. And I've been called both, but Chief Morale Officer is the one on the card.
Well, as long as they're appropriate names. That's on the card, right? And people
exactly
call you
right.
the right things.
That's exactly right, Mark.
So welcome, Kurt. So glad to have you here.
Well, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for remembering. I mean, 20 years ago, that's quite a bit back in time. Who knew then, 20 years ago, someday I'm going to do a podcast and I'm going to have guests on and I'm going to reach out to people I know. So it never even entered your mind then, did it?
No, it didn't even cross my mind. I mean, at that point, I said 20 years ago, it was probably closer to 17 because it was right after my accident when I was in a chair when we met.
Wow.
And we met in Salt Lake at an NSA meeting, if I remember correctly. Yes. National Speakers Association.
Yes. I was a guest, wasn't I? I was doing a guest presentation or something there.
Yeah, I think you were doing a guest presentation.
Because of Brad Barton or Chad Hymas or one of the guys up there. That was
one of the guys. Yeah, one of those world-renowned, everybody knows speakers if you're in the speaking world, And I think actually at that particular event, Mark Eaton was probably there as well.
Mark, wow, he was there. Yeah. You've got a great memory.
Well, I got to know Mark a little bit later, right? I mean, we went to several different National Speaker Association meetings, and then got to spend a little bit of time with him away from those, and come to find out he was a huge foodie. And I loved going to the restaurant with him, and he'd sit down. I don't think I've ever sat down with somebody that owned a restaurant that took such pride in what was being served.
What was the name of that? It was up kind of by Cottonwood. What was the name of that place? I can't remember the name of his restaurant. It was so good.
Mistakes. It'll come to me.
Yeah, it was so good.
Yeah, it was a good restaurant. It'll come to me about probably when we get done. You're like, oh, that was the name of it.
That was the place. Yeah.
So how have you been? I mean, we haven't really spoke much in years. So you're in Arizona now, right?
Yeah, we moved from Georgia to Arizona. We've been in Arizona 10 years now. kind of southeast, Gilbert, Mesa, kind of south of Scottsdale, an hour and a half north of Tucson. But yeah, northeast, southeast corner of Phoenix. And we just love it. We've loved it here. We've got, I think when I met you, we had 5 kids. Now we got 6. We had one born like a month before we moved out of Georgia, and he's 11 now. So we've got 2 at home, and the other 4 out there in the world trying to, figure out what they want to do. And some of them doing really well, and some of them still figuring it out. And I get that. So.
That is so true. And sometimes we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. Oh, hey. Oh, so I just heard this. And this guy was a massive intellectual speaker, really, really fun guy. He said, some people live their lives knowing exactly what they want to do. They want to be a lawyer. They want to be a doctor. They want to be an accountant. And because they know what they want to do, they do it. And that's their punishment. He said, some people live every day of their life. They're not sure what they want to do, what they want to be when they grow up. And he said, and that's their reward.
Interesting.
Kind of flipped it on its head, because I always thought something was wrong with me because I had those friends that knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I was like, yeah, I don't really know. And so I just kind of go where I'm invited, and it's worked out okay for me. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought it was interesting. I never heard that before.
That's an interesting twist on it. I've never thought of it that way.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your journey. And as I mentioned to you before we started, I found it's obviously on your website, but as I was doing my research and just kind of trying to get ready for today so we could have a chat, you actually were an Army Ranger. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1,000 years ago. Yeah, 1984 to 88. You've got people listening to you that weren't even born then, so that's kind of tragic.
Oh, well, you and I were.
84. Yeah, I did 4 years. That was a really important time for me. I came out of high school in East Texas, and after 2 years after high school, from 18 to 20, I had some really cool jobs. Not cool that like they were mind bending, but they paid well. Yeah. But because I had no discipline and no plan, and I was a young man, I spent the money faster than I made it. So by the time I was 20, I thought I got nothing to show for 2 years. And I bumped into somebody from high school, and this guy was still driving me down Broadway in his truck like it was freaking from the Grease movie or something. I was like, wow.
He's still dragging me.
Yeah, I just remember leaving that conversation going, what a loser. And then going, yeah, you're not doing much better. You're not cruising Broadway with the kids from high school, but you haven't accomplished much. So I went to my dad and said, Dad, I think I need to get out of town. And, my circle of influence isn't that great. I need some discipline in my life. And my dad goes, I said, I think about joining the military. My dad goes, that might be a good thing. Inside, I'm sure he was like, yes, please. But that 4 years, Mark, for me, I don't know about you. Did you athletics or band? Did you do any disciplines when you were in high school growing up?
In high school, yeah, I was actually in marching band.
Okay, so that was a thing that you did. So you had structure, you had community. I didn't have any of those things. But I think athletics or band or even theater gives you a community and some structure and helps you build some skills and some confidence. I didn't have any of that stuff, so I was kind of winging it. Going in the military was probably the first time I'd ever physically taxed my body. And that first year was not a good year for me. I was, learning how to run, learning how to do push-ups. Nobody was looking over going, that guy's crushing it, But after a year, right, basic training, AIT, airborne school, then you're in the Ranger community. I'm always hanging on. The first year, I'm just hanging on by my fingernails, just barely making the standards. And then my body finally started catching up, and I had a foundation, and I had a gaining confidence. And then by the second year, I was like, oh, I'm coming in near the front. Sometimes I was even in the front. And that, for me, that was a brand new experience. Having never done hard things, having never had the confidence or the coordination to play sports, to come in at the top amongst an elite group of soldiers that was a brand new thing. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to have skills. This is what it feels like to have some grit. And I'd never had that before. So that was a pretty big deal. And that gave me the confidence to try and do other things that I would have never tried before. So it was pretty important. That my military experience was a very powerful one for me.
Good. Yeah. When you said you had some, it was kind of a watershed, a little bit of a moment for you. I had a similar like that when I was racing hand cycles, because I was in a wheelchair, and I raced hand cycles for years.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I was doing the St. George Marathon.
You were racing them though. Okay. Yeah. All right.
And so I'm doing the St. George Marathon, and I don't remember what year it was. I have to look back at what year it was. 11, 12, something like that, 2010, 2011, 12, somewhere in there. And I'm doing the race, and there's always one guy that I could never beat. I mean, it was just I would come into second place behind him for the marathon. I was like, I'm on the podium, but okay, cool. But still, and he was a friend of mine. His name's Neil. And I could just never beat Neil. He's so fast.
Right.
And we're cruising along, and then I'm having a really, really good race. And then all of a sudden I come through this area in southern Utah called Vail, and I come through Vail,
I know.
and that's a steep downhill and then a steep out hill. And I'm coming down through Vail at like 55 miles an hour, and I'm in front of everybody. And I had that brief moment of, so this is what it feels like. And of course he caught up with me and beat me by 5 minutes.
Yeah, but there was that moment.
I had a moment that I was like, hey.
I don't see any taillights. It's just me. It's just me.
Yeah, it was a rare moment that I was in front of him, and he had a little mechanical. I wasn't faster. He had a mechanical, and he still caught up and beat me. But we laughed about that later, because I was like, oh my gosh, that was such a cool feeling. So similar to what you were feeling after a couple years.
Yep. So yeah, that was big for me. That was pretty big deal for me. So yeah.
So how did you go from that to the chief morale officer?
There's probably an important piece in the center there. So I was raised in the faith tradition of the Latter-day Saints. That was what I was raised in. I don't know that I ever paid the price to have a relationship with the divine. I think I was just kind of raised it, and I didn't really appreciate it. I didn't pay any tolls. Like I said, like high school, any relationship you want in life is going to take some work, and that includes, I believe, a relationship with God. So somewhere around 2 years in the military, I hadn't experienced parachuting. And I got in my head, Mark, that my parachute's not going to open. My parachute's not going to open. And it opened, but it was in my head that it wasn't.
Right.
And you can't like, hey, Sergeant, I know. I'd like to just kind of set this one.
I got this feeling.
Yeah. And so,
yeah.
But then I thought, well, then it kind of came to, and this is, so this will tell your listeners that this guy's not really bright, but this is how my brain works. So then I thought, what do I really believe is going to happen? Now, I had my faith tradition, and I certainly had some Baptist in the unit, and there was some Methodist, and there was all the flavors of all the different denominations of people, and they all had their own theology and their own about what happens in the next life. It's a judgment box, whatever it is. So,
right.
And I had my own that I was taught, but I was like, but I thought, what do I really believe is going to happen? Is St. Peter at the gate? What do I really believe? And so this is what I concluded. And I have nothing to back this up, but this is what I concluded in my little brain at the time. And that is, I believe that there is something after this life. And I believe I'm just going to stand in front of divinity. I'm going to stand in front of God, whatever that looks like for anybody. And that basically God's going to ask me one question. And it wasn't whether I've been good or bad. He's going to say, so Kirk, what do you know about me? And it was going to be a short conversation.
Well,
because Mark, I've been raised with the books, right? I mean, but I've never read the books. So I went home and anyway, my parachute opened, and I thought, man, I've had access to these books, this knowledge about the divine for my whole life, and I've never paid the price. But now with my confidence and my determination and believing that I could, I poured into the books. And then I thought, yeah, it'd be awkward for me to give 4 years to Uncle Sam and not give a couple years to God. So that's what I chose to serve a 2-year mission for my church. Now that took me to Utah. That's where my 2-year assignment was. And then afterwards, my parents had moved, so there was no reason for me to go back to Texas. I hadn't been there in 6 years. And so I just stayed in Utah. And I met a girl in college, and we got married. And one of my neighbors hired me because I think he thought I couldn't provide for my family, so he hired me. A couple years later, his company was acquired by another company, and they wanted the 29 really smart people, the men and women who actually had IT certifications. I wasn't one of those people. My boss, he hired me because I could help manage the egos. I was pretty good with culture stuff, so I could help people get along. And so this company acquired our company, and this is not an acquisition you're going to hear about in any newspaper. By the way, this is small. So just whatever you're imagining that you heard on Wall Street and on the news, this is not that. This is a small mom and pop buying another small mom and pop. Okay. They said, hey, Kirk, you seem like a nice guy, nothing personal, but maybe three weeks from now, be good if you had another job. So they told me writing's on the wall. And this company they were going to be three companies, Mark. They were going to be an IT consulting company. They were going to be an IT training company, and they were going to do an IT support company. They were essentially going to be a call center component to the company. And this call center will be an outsourced call center. So remember Gateway Computers back in the day?
Yeah, I do.
Or Microsoft or Network Associates. So they don't staff up. They outsource their customer service to the lowest bidder they can find that can do the job. So that was going to be our space. We were going to be a call center, outsourced call center for IT specific partners. And so the guy that was going to be in charge of that was a guy named Art Coombs. And Art knew that I was, I didn't have any IT skills. But he came to me and said, Kirk, he said, we're going to create 1,000 jobs in the next 2 years, and I want you to be on my team. Well, automatically, every time he said he was going to create 1,000 jobs, everyone thought, yeah, who's this nut job? Because nobody anywhere in the circle of influence that we had ever seen any company grow more than 25 jobs in 20 years. He just sounded like he was from another world. At the same time, though, he said, Kirk, he said, it doesn't appear to me, Kirk, that you have any business acumen, which is a nice way to say you don't have a clue about. You're a nice guy. Yeah, you don't have a clue about business and stuff. And I didn't. And he said, but if you'll stay with me, I'll teach you an industry. I'll teach you some skills. He said, I can teach you the stuff to help you be successful. He said, what I can't teach you is what you've already figured out. And I said, what is that? He goes, you know how to show up with sunshine. You've already chosen the kind of energy and spirit and person you want to be when you walk in any room. And he said, people have to choose that for themselves. You can't train that. You can choose it or not. He said, so I'll teach you this stuff. Well, long story short, 2 years later, we created 1,000 jobs. The other two divisions of that company failed. So the vice president of my division became the president of the company. And I got to spend 2 years with 8 or 10 people that had 15 or 20 years experience while we created 1,000 jobs. It was like I was in a master's program for leadership development, for learning. It was an incredible experience. And along the way, we did have some very unique, measurable outcomes in our company. And the conferences, the industry said, man, you guys are having some unique outcomes. You're having the lowest turnover we've ever seen in an outsourced contact center. You're having the highest recruitment rate. You're not spending any money on recruitment. And yet you have people waiting for jobs in an outsourced call center. Well, right down the street, like if you went from Utah County, Mark, in that day, and you drove up into Salt Lake County, and you looked at, there were 6 billboards from the point of the mountain to the Salt Lake City point of the mountain. There were 6 billboards owned by ComCom or Convergys that they were always advertising. There's a person with a headset on there saying, hey, if you're looking for a great career, they were always looking for
those.
Yeah. They were always hiring because they were always churning. They had 200% attrition rates in some of these contact centers. We had 17%. So we were so unlike. So my boss sent me to the conferences to tell our story, which was nerve-wracking because you're in a room full of people with 15, 20 years experience and you've got 6 months. But Art said that was an advantage. He said, Kirk, you're so stupid. You can't lie. All you can tell them is the truth. And he said, you're not a consultant. You're not a consultant. You're not pitching anything. All you're saying is you're really just teaching them about servant leadership and an intense focus on culture and relationships and how that makes for a healthy culture and healthy people and healthy outcomes. He said, all you can tell them is the truth, Kirk. And he said, and so go do that. And it turned out to be very appealing to people that I wasn't selling anything and that I was talking about, hey, anybody can do this if they'll just decide spiritually and emotionally that they're committed to doing it. And so that was very endearing. And I had a knack for storytelling. And so those things got me invited to talk to other conferences, And then finally some guy approached me and said, you should join the National Speakers Association. And I didn't even know what that was. I thought NSA, it was national security. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. I thought the same thing when I was approached. Yeah. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I didn't know. And that was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah. Kurt Brinkman is the one that wanted me to join NSA.
Do you ever hear the name Mark Sanborn?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was the guy that was a keynote at the conference. I was doing a skit at a conference and he thought the skit really landed. Forrest Gump at the help desk. He said you should, but he was so kind and gave me some advice, and I promptly didn't follow that advice for like 6 months. And then I called him for some advice. He goes, "What'd you do with the last advice I gave you?" And I was like, "Oh, that's embarrassing. I'd done nothing." And he was like, "Why would I give you more advice when it doesn't seem like you value my advice?" And so I was like, "I'll call you back." And the advice he gave me was to join the National Speakers Association and to join the local chapter. And there was a third thing I don't remember. And I didn't do any one of the three. So I hung up. I did all three of those things. Then I called him back, and he was so gracious. He was he was wonderful to me. Very kind.
Yeah, Kurt was the one that pushed me to do that, and then he passed away in 2010, and that was interesting because he I read an article in a magazine back in 1979. Yeah. Where he was talking about being an Olympian. He was the first guy to ever finish the Boston Marathon in just a 4-wheel wheelchair. And then he was a Paralympian and all that. And I remember at that point, I'd had a really rare bone disease as a kid. And so I remember at that point, I thought, man, if I'm ever in a wheelchair, I'm going to do that kind of stuff.
My hell, you
right?
said that? You said that?
Yeah, as a little kid, right? Because I'd had this rare bone disease in one of my hips, and so they'd always said it was possible. And I thought, if that's ever going to happen, I'm going to be like this guy. And then it was really kind of fun because I'm in the chair. My accident was in April, and within a couple of months, one of my neighbors, who was an old mountain goat, I mean, he started running marathons when he was 40.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And now he's like in his 70s, and he would go running up the mountains above Pleasant Grove.
Wow.
Right. Just hardcore mountain goat guy.
That
He's
is
like, Mark,
hardcore.
I have this 5K here in Pleasant Grove. Do this 5K. And so I started in my an everyday wheelchair and just started pushing and pushing and pushing. And so I get done with the 5K, and the theme was beat Beethoven, because they would play Beethoven's Fifth. And you had to get done by the time the whole thing finished.
Oh my gosh.
And so they had a guy in a Beethoven wig running down the road, right? And on the back of his shirt says, "If you can read this, run faster," because he was the pace guy.
That's so clever. That's so clever.
It was great, right? So I get across the finish line, and I'm like, I just did a 5K. I've never done anything like that. And
what year was this?
This would have been 2008.
I love it. Okay, go ahead. You'd never anything like it.
And this little Down syndrome boy comes up, and he starts messing with my chair, climbs up on my lap. I have no idea who this kid is. Okay. And I'm just, you're going, you're looking around like, whose kid is this?
Right.
And this young lady walks up, and she goes, I'm so sorry. She goes, his grandpa's in a wheelchair, and he's just fascinated by him. I'm like, yeah, no big deal. I mean, I love kids. So I got pushed. I would be at church, and they would push me into the corner of the foyer, just little kids just pushing me around. I'd let them, right? And she said, so how long have you been pushing? Well, that's what wheelchair racers call it. They go for a push. And I said, this is my very first race. And she goes, oh, my dad pushed for years and years. I'm like, that is so cool. And I said, what's his name? And she goes, Kurt Brinkman. I'm like, wait, what? The guy that I read the article, I already knew who it was.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And she goes, he lives right here in Pleasant Grove, right? I'm like, wait, what? So I actually got to meet him and got to hang out with him for the last few months before he had an unexpected medical thing come up and he passed away.
Right.
But got to hang out with him, got to do some stuff with him, and just loved the guy. And he kept saying, you have to speak. You've got a story, and just kept pushing on me to do it. And it was a lot of fun. I did it for a few years.
Right.
Not as successfully as you've done it, but really had a lot of fun with it. And I will tell you that, and I mentioned this on our call.
Yeah. Sir Kevin, I love that book.
Those of you that don't know, Sir Kevin of Devon was part of Kirk's presentation at the National Speakers Association, and he read this book. Nice. I had to go find it because it's obviously out of print. It took a while to find it.
Yes, it does.
I've used it in a couple of speaking gigs.
As well, you should. Every couple of years, I don't know, if it ever crossed my mind, there was a while there because I didn't have one and it's hard to find. So every couple of years, I'd just go looking for one. If I found one or two, I'd order them. Just I got to have them because you end up giving them away. And so that's why I have 4. I love that you have those. So you used it a couple of times. People loved it, didn't they? Yeah. It's a great book. It really is engaging. It's a simple language book. It's a big picture book, which is fun. Yeah. That book was introduced to me by the same man who hired me in the story I just told. Really? Yeah. I have that book of yours, and then that you mentioned, the Sir Kevin of Devon, and then I have the Cookie Thief. You don't have the dog poop book? I don't. Nope, I don't. I'm going to have to get it now. We have to fix that, Mark.
The Dog Poop Initiative.
This, this is my most famous book.
Okay.
This is my super best smeller right here. All right. Well, let's we'll get that in the mail to you. Happy to send that to you.
No worries, no worries. Guess what? I'm going to be in Phoenix the first of next month, so we maybe connect up then.
I will be. No, probably not. I'm doing this thing in Scotland. It's not a speaking thing. It's called the Catter and Yomp. And basically it's, here in the States, you're pretty familiar with like Wounded Warrior, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. There's something called benevolent few. Basically it's like Wounded Warrior, but it's for all the allied forces. So they have these yomps. So you have to be invited to go. And so I met some guy who invited me to go. I got interviewed by someone in Washington, D.C. They start there at the British Embassy, and then they go over to Edinburgh, spend a couple of days kind of seeing where William Wallace battled, that kind of thing. And then you go on 54 miles in 24 hours is kind of the goal. But you're walking with people soldiers from Australia, Canada, all the allied nations have a certain representative of soldiers there. And you get to walk with them on the Catter and Yomp.
Nice.
And then the last day they do the Scotland Hills games, where they throw logs and rocks or whatever they do. So that's the first basically 8 days of June. That's when you're going to be here in Arizona?
I'll be somewhere in that first part. We've got a new sales guy that we've hired in for the company I work for. We've hired down in Phoenix, and so I'll be down there doing some training.
I think we should coordinate better, so when you come down, we can hang out. I don't feel like
we will have to coordinate that. Yeah.
I feel like you should have called me before you make this date. So that's okay.
I haven't bought my ticket yet.
All right.
I'm just
all right. We can save it. We can save this then.
So you became the chief morale officer.
Yeah.
And
I made that title up, Mark.
Yeah.
There was nothing on the org chart that said that. So the position that I was assigned on the org chart said Director of Total Quality. And there's nothing about that I think can inspire anybody to want to get up in the morning. But I had heard a speaker, a guy named Tom Peters, who wrote several books in search of excellence. And in his day, he was a big deal. And he said something during a presentation. He said, if you don't like your title, change it. If you don't like your job description, do something different, but do it so well that they have to keep you, that kind of thing. So I thought, yeah. So I made up the title Chief Morale Officer. I went and gave some donuts to the person in the HR and marketing that made the cards. And so I gave them some donuts. And so they made my cards. So the cards said name of the company, my name, cell phone number, Chief Morale Officer. And my boss, Art, as lovely as he was, thought it was kind of cheesy and ridiculous and kind of unintentionally.
He came from the business world.
Yeah. Unintentionally kind of poo-pooed it. And so I was like, oh, maybe I made it. Then I felt a little foolish until just a few weeks later, Gateway Computers showed up. We didn't have a contract with them yet. And we didn't make the RFP process. We didn't make the bid. We were competing against some of these bigger shops, and their pricing was just better than ours. They could depreciate their assets, on a big spread, and we couldn't. But Art begged them to come and do a tour, which they did. And the tour, we didn't give them an executive tour. We had two of our $12 and $14 an hour kids. We had our agents give them the tour. And that's typically the VIPs pick them up and they go somewhere for lunch in a boardroom. But we decided, no, we're not going to get this business anyway. So let's just do something way different. So they gave them the tour. Then afterwards, they came up to the boardroom and the plan was for Art to fall on one knee and beg for business because we were really needed to land a couple contracts to grow this vision. And before he got into his pitch, Jim Price, the vice president of Gateway, held up his hand and said, Art, don't, and they knew each other from Europe. He says, Art, don't say anything. You're going to ruin the mood. And he said, we just had a great experience down there. And we need to do, our company needs to do business with a company like yours, where the culture is so important, you actually have a chief morale officer, right? So
nice.
The title that my boss poo-pooed just got rolled out as a competitive advantage. But my boss didn't miss a beat. He goes, when I hired Kirk to be our chief morale officer, our focus on culture was strategic and deliberate. And he just rolled right into it like it
was all him.
Yeah, it was his idea. I'm over there Ronnie Johansson, Vice President of Operations. He looks at me like, because he knows the story too. He was there when I got shamed for my cards, but after that, it was never an issue.
That's awesome.
Okay, let's take that same title that you like. The very first conference I went to, so I got sent to tell our story. Yes. Now I get invited back. They gave me a couple breakout sessions. I'm not a keynote speaker, man. I'm just there, right? So they gave me imagine a 3.5 day event in Las Vegas. Most people don't go to the sessions on the last day.
Right.
And certainly the last 4 hours of the last day, no one's going in. I have one of those sessions.
Done that.
Okay, they tell me in advance. They say, "Hey, Kirk, listen, this is kind of how it works here. Don't expect a lot. Don't take it personally. People just fly home early, da-da-da. You're lucky if you get 12 people in there." I said, "Great, fine." I go in there. My room's full. I got 80 something people in there. And I go, "Why'd you guys come?" Now, remember, I'm not famous. They don't know anything about me. The reason they came in, I was the least painful choice of like 14 sessions to choose from. They said they liked the title, which was Tools for the Cultural Tune-Up by Chief Morale Officer Kirk Weisler. And look, I was the least painful choice. That's my strategy for success. Make yourself the least painful choice.
Yeah, I had one like that. I was asked to speak at the Utah Department of Education conference in St. George years ago.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, that's awesome. And oh, by the way, you're the last speaker on the last day. Well, if anybody knows St. George, Utah, and you're in the farthest corner of the state away from the major population centers. So, and then you're 4.5 hours of drive just to get to something decent population wise.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, everyone's super anxious to go.
Yes.
And so I'm there. And as they're making the announcement, as they're introducing me, you're seeing people pop up and walk out.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, I learned something not too long ago from an artist, a country singer that my wife and I went to a concert. And he said, you play for the open seat. You play for the filled seats.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so I went, you know what? And he said it. I heard that recently, but that was my attitude then. And I was like, okay. And so that artist by the name, shout out Skip Ewing. Those of you that don't know who Skip Ewing, you need to go find out who he is.
You got to check up Skip.
And so anyway, I just start doing my whole thing. I'm just a dork, right? And it's like I tell it's.
No, you are. You are all in. You're all in, man. You were all in.
Yeah. And what I loved was about halfway through, people started coming back in. And what was happening is people were texting them going, you need to get back here. And because I was shocked, like, why are people coming back? This person left. And later they said, oh, yeah, we were telling him you got to come back because we were having such a good time. It was such a good
Mark.
And it was one of those rare ones you go, that was so cool.
Solid. I love it. Great story.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Great story.
So you went from, chief morale officer to, you are the storyteller master.
Maybe. Hey, you ready for this? So this is my new keynote.
Okay.
So just think about all the conferences you've been to. It doesn't matter what the discipline is, marketing conference, IT conference. There's going to be someone in the last decade at almost if the conference has 2 days worth of tracks, someone's doing at least one session on storytelling. Agreed?
Yeah, true.
Okay, so we don't need any more books on storytelling. I'm not saying storytelling is not important. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get better at it, but I think there's something more important than storytelling. You ready for this? Story giving people a story to tell. And that's what you did. Let's go to your last example. Look, this guy is so good, right? That my colleagues got me back in the room, and it was the best 40 minutes of the freaking 2-day event. They go home with a story about this guy, Mark. They were in the parking lot. They were at the first traffic light, and someone persuaded them because Mark's in there freaking giving people an experience, giving them a story to tell. So when we give people a story to tell, because everyone's going to go home and say, how was the event? I was all right. It was okay. It's a long drive.
We ate too much.
I stayed up too late. Right? Or they go, it was the cool. Can I just tell you about the last speaker? He really said something that I just been thinking about. And I've been thinking about our relationship and something he taught me. Right? Giving people a story to tell. And that's what leaders want to do. We want to give people a story to tell where they get to be the hero of their own story. It's not a story about how great you are as a leader. It's a story about where they had a realization and they saw more of their own potential, more of their own gift. and they're ready to leverage that and to lift while they, I just think that's where I want to focus. I want to do a whole year or two just talking about story giving.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And that is so true. I mean, you go across the board. I think every one of us has that experience where you've been able to be in that story giving mode.
Yeah. And think about the people that we celebrate in our lives, people that, like, for example, your opening story. You read an article about this guy. It shaped your mind. And soon it's almost like manifesting. It's like this person's always been on my mind. I even made this weird declaration before he even was in a wheelchair that if this ever happened to me, I want to be just like that. And then the last few months of his life, he acted like, hey, listen, I've got a few days left, but he didn't act that way. He was like, no, I want to spend some time with you. He gave you stories, gave you experiences, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, after my accident, I spent months kind of feeling, you're not connecting with people, right? Because I was so out of sorts. You go from a very active guy who was very much into weightlifting and all that world, and then all of a sudden now you're in a wheelchair. And so I spent months just not connecting with people and just really having a hard time.
Yeah.
And then finally got to Kurt, where we actually sat knee to knee, two guys in wheelchairs. And it was the coolest moment. I left there crying.
Yeah.
Right. Because I called my wife. I'm like, oh my gosh, someone understands me. Right.
Right.
And to have that bond and to find out he lived a mile from us. So we had him over for dinner and we got to know. I mean, it was a cool thing.
What a great gift. What a great gift.
He was the one that did the giving then.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Because
now I look back and go, wow.
He gave you stories to tell. I know you know this, but I can't think. You and I have in common Chad Hymas. When Chad had his accident, for those that might be listening, Chad is quadruple.
Yeah, he's a quadriplegic.
I can't say the word quadriplegic. So when he was trying to adjust to this idea that I'm not going to walk again or use my arms again or hold my kid again or make love to my wife again. He's just processing all these things and having understandably a very difficult season there. Art Berg, his dad contacts Art Berg, and Art played the same role in a similar role in Chad's life that Kirk played in yours. Similar, not the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here's Chad laying there in his hospital bed and he can't do anything. And this guy with the same level of disability rolls in, transfers himself out of his chair onto the bed, undresses, and then redresses himself, which is no small task.
No, it's not.
Right? Then puts himself back in the chair and tells Chad, listen, what I just did, you can do. So get it done and then give me a call. And Chad, it wasn't an immediate conversion. Chad said he stewed in that for a little while, and then finally determination set in, and he made up his mind to do some things, and then things got really hard, right?
Yeah, that's when the work begins.
That's when the real work begins.
Right.
Okay. Well, lovely. But yeah, so Art and Kurt both played roles giving stories to legacy makers of their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember a guy once that gave me a story.
Go ahead.
And he has no idea to this day that he did that.
Tell me. Share.
So I was the executive director of the Utah hand cycling team.
Okay.
And we put on races here in the state, part of the Tour of Utah.
Okay.
Right? So we would join up with the tour at different, like in Park City and stuff like that. And we'd join them on their race days and we would do a hand cycle race. And one particular day, we'd already had 2 days of racing over in Midway. And my wife and I are heading to Park City for the final race, which is what they call a criterium, which is a closed course. And it's how many laps can you do in a certain amount of time. And that's who wins. Right now, there's different race divisions based off of disability. So someone that's a quadriplegic, they're in a different class than I was because I had more ability to use my whole upper body as opposed to not being able to. Well, on our way there, I literally am telling my wife, if this guy from California, how can we uninvite him for next year? All he does is complain, whines, moans. I can't stand this guy. He's ruining the whole event. I mean, my brain had just spun up into just negativity, right?
Right.
And we get over there. And this was one of the rare times where I was actually racing, but I was the race director. I did that 1 year, never again, because it's too hard to do it all.
Yeah.
But I'm going along, and I remember climbing up Main Street in Park City once. Because you're going up Main Street and then come back down, and then you go up Main Street. And I mean, it was all you were just lactic acid. Everything was burning. You're going to die, right?
Okay.
And I'm climbing up Main Street, and I look over, and there's this guy, and he is drafting behind one of the guys on the Utah hand cycle team. They're both quads, but I'm thinking, you piece of crap, why you have won all the division in the whole race, and now you're drafting off the slowest guy? What in the world? And that's where I am in such a bad place. And then at the end of the race, one of my neighbors who came up and took pictures came and showed me pictures. And this guy, and I'll say his name now, his name is Harold Bostic. He's from Southern California. He was pushing my teammate up the hill because he knew he would. My teammate, Alan, was never going to be on a podium because he didn't have that ability. But Harold was pushing this guy up the hill so that he would come across the finish line ahead of him. Now, you talk about a shift in my mentality. All of a sudden I went, how do I uninvite this guy to, oh my gosh, we have to have Harold back.
Yeah.
So he didn't know it, but he gave me a story to really talk about that paradigm shift in the way we think. It was just a really cool experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've got pictures of that. And so when I post this video up, I'll show a picture of Harold pushing Alan.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do. Oh my gosh, what a great story. Yeah, story giving. It's all about story giving people a story to tell. Yeah, no question.
So tell me about your greatest book, your poop initiative. How did you come up with that? I'm curious.
Well, it's a true story. The original story is in the back of the book. This email. This was an email. Okay. Let's go back. We're pushing 18 years now, maybe even a couple more. I don't know. So we live in Cedar Hills, Utah. We got our third child is almost 5 years old. That's Joshua. He's 26 now. So wow. So I guess we are 20 years. My wife's from Great Britain, so the kids have to play some soccer because that's the only sport they recognize as worthy. Right. I don't play soccer, but I have been officially volunteered to be the assistant soccer coach dad. And so my job essentially, Mark, is very simple. I got to show up with a blue Gatorade and keep the kids off the field and out of the parking lot until it's our turn to play. That's my job. And I got to tell you, I'm crushing the job. Coach Coleman is the real coach of the team. And so if there's things you can get 5-year-olds to do to play soccer, he knows how to do those things. I'm blue Gatorade parking lot guy. So it's Saturday morning. This is in Alpine, Utah. There's 4 fields behind the Alpine School District. We're on one of these 4 fields. Now, these are 5-year-olds. This is a big field for little kids. Nonetheless, I think they probably shortened it. I think they probably have a goal halfway, whatever they did. So I'm standing there. I've got 3 or 4 of the kids from our neighborhood. They're right there by my side watching this second game. It's just finishing up. We're the third game. And that's when it happened. That's when some adults see me standing there, Mark, and go, hey, you on the field next? I go, yeah. They point onto the field and they said, you'll need to watch out. There's a big pile of dog poop out there, right on the side, right? But it's on the field, but it's right there. You see it? And I go, yeah, it's huge. Like a Great Dane was out there and dropped a load, right? So I was like, okay, thanks. It doesn't even register to me. I'm like, okay, well, and I'm going, really? That's kind of weird. Then before I really process it, I get another poop warning from another adult who didn't see me at the first one. I've now got 2 poop warnings in less than 3 minutes. And I'm going, no one's cleaned that up? Because that dog didn't run out there during the middle of the game and do it. This poop has been there all day.
Like, sitting there how long?
Yeah. So then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there was a game before this game. Has no one cleaned this poop up all day? Coach Coleman shows up. I watch him get the same 2 poop warnings I got. He looked at me like, we don't even have a discussion, Mark. We both know without even saying anything. When their game ends, we're going to get our kids doing warm-ups. We're going to clean up the poop. We're going to start the game. There's no discussion. That's just what we're going to do. So their game ends. We'll go out there to get our teams doing some warm-ups. Before we can make a move on the poop, this kid blows the whistle. He's the referee assigned to the field that day. He calls us over. So we got coach, assistant coach of the team, and 2 coaches from the departing team. We've now got a 7-person freaking poop huddle on the field. And the kid with the whistle goes, hey, listen, if you're not aware, there's a big pile of poop over there. Don't worry about it. We've been managing that thing all day. If the kids start to kind of move that direction, I'll blow the whistle. They're little kids. They don't even know. We'll bring the ball back on the other side. Just keep playing. It's all good. Right? We're changing the rules of the game now. Somewhere in the middle of his little poop blather, I saw Coach Coleman. He stepped out of the huddle. He didn't want to be a part of it anymore. I saw him walking towards the trash can. I followed his example. Trash can, cardboard stick. 60, 90 seconds later, the poop is clean. It's gone. At which point, Mark, a parent of the departing team said, hey, yeah, somebody really needed to do that, And I'm like, oh, man. And and Coleman
And their
said,
kid was the one with the poop up the back.
yeah. And I said, and it could have been you, hoping that my tone implied how pathetic I thought they were. No, so that's what inspired the book. What really happened was we, of course, played the next hour, never thought about the poop. It was the next morning that I woke up seething. I woke up thinking about all these little kids who watched all of these adults not do leadership.
Yeah.
They watched them point and complain and blame and bemoan, but they didn't see leadership. How are we going to raise the leaders of tomorrow with that example? I mean, that's like looking in DC sometimes. You're like, these are our politicians, and they see more in pointing and blaming than, hey, let's just get this done. Let's get this done. And so I was like, yeah. So then I wrote this email. Now everyone's got a blog and a podcast now, but go back in time 20 years, you had an email list. Right. And I probably had a couple thousand people on my email list. I typed this thing up. I didn't spell check it because I didn't. I sent that out to my list. And for me, it was a cleansing thing. What I didn't expect was over the next 3 weeks, I would get over 20 responses. And the responses weren't great story. The responses were, we read your story in our staff meeting, this hotel chain headquarters. We read your story at our staff meeting, Pentagon. We read your story at our staff meeting, IT services division. We read your story at our staff meeting. Then my brother said, Gal Kirk, you should do a book about that. And I go, yeah. He goes, no, really. And I go, well, no, really. And I go, I don't know how to do a book. And I never had a bucket list, do a book about poop. I'm like, I don't know. But finally, my brother wouldn't let it go. And I said, okay, you find an artist, I'll do a book. He had an artist lined up the next day.
All right, there went that excuse.
Yeah. So now I've never sold the book, but people have bought the book. Like we're pushing 500,000 copies of just, and people sometimes I was really proud of this for a while, but Boeing isn't really in the news as a hero. But Boeing was ordering cases of this about a decade ago. They were ordering hundreds of copies. And I called them and said, what are you doing with this book? They go, we're using it as part of our Six Sigma Lean initiative.
Really?
Eliminate waste in practice, process, and personnel. So it's about getting lean. Harley Davidson ordered it by the case for a while. It's now, we know, in at least 80,000 different organizations being used as a piece of training material. 80,000. Now, when I say that doesn't mean American Express is using it across the board. That means their IT services might be using it. But 80,000 organizations use that book as part of and it looks like a children's book.
Yeah.
And they say, Mark, that's what they love about it. They say, Kirk, they said, we can read your story in 5 minutes. Everybody gets it. No one is being shamed, but we're all immediately going, oh my gosh, we see ourselves in it. We're pointing at this broken process. We're pointing at this broken system that we work around and warn people about, but we should just fix it. And so they have meaningful discussions about their number 2 issue, their poop issue. So yeah, so that's the book.
How much do you sell them for?
They're like $10 or $11. Don't buy it on Amazon. Buy it off my website. Amazon freaking makes bank every time someone buys there. But if you buy from me, I'll double your order. If any of your listeners buy from me, I will double your order. So you're going to get a great deal. Yeah, you're going to pay for shipping, but you're still going to beat Amazon.
Sounds awesome. We'll make sure we put up a link on your website off to it. So
just say, heard you on Mark's deal. What do you call your podcast? It's the
Double Helix.
Double Helix. Thank you. Heard on Double Helix, or hey, we heard you talking to Mark, whatever. And whatever you order, I'll double it.
You're awesome.
Happy to do it.
Well, Kurt, thank you so much for coming on. It's been good to catch up a little bit. It's been years since we've actually seen each other. And we'll try and coordinate that my trip to Phoenix a little bit.
I really feel like that would be a good idea. Then we could hang out. We could high five. It's only going to be, when you get here in June, it's only going to be like 1:15. It's going to be fine.
I know. I was just talking to our new guy today, and I told him, I said, listen, it seems like every year for the past 3 or 4 years, I end up in Phoenix in the summertime. And I'm thinking, why don't they send me in February? I've lived in Phoenix. Send me in February.
Yeah, February. February is like, yeah, it's perfect in February. 70 degrees. 70 degrees. It's beautiful. Mark, hey, thanks for maybe a guest on your Double Helix. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Appreciate your friendship. Absolutely.
I appreciate what you're doing. And I love the idea of story giving. I think that's such a really cool concept, a twist on that, which I think is really important. So thank you again. And thank you all for coming and joining us. And I appreciate Kurt for being with us today.
So
Absolutely a pleasure. Double Helix.
All right.
Go crush it.
Thank-